Welcome to episode 10 of the How to Film Weddings podcast. Hey everyone, my name is John and I am joined by my good friend Nick Miller. Say hey, Nick.
Hey.
And today we have a special treat for you. Our guest is well known throughout the wedding community and we're beyond excited that he's on today. He needs no introduction, but we thought we'd give him one anyway. Widely considered one of the top wedding and event cinematographers in the world, Mr. Ray Roman routinely travels the globe documenting weddings for high-profile clients, as well as numerous star athletes. He's been the official wedding cinematographer for the Trump family, Gucci Mane, royal weddings, and the highly publicized $20 million Redwood Forest nuptials of social media mogul, Mr. Sean Parker. Winner of countless awards. So many things about this guy. Aside from his personal achievements, he's extremely passionate about his craft and always looks forward to handcrafting beautiful wedding films. Ladies and gentlemen, the one, the only, Mr. Ray Roman. How's it going, Ray?
What's up, brother?
So good to have you on. We're really excited for sure. As Nick and I were kind of chatting about the How to Film Weddings podcast, we wanted to bring people on that not only were pioneers in the industry, but people that could really add value, you know, for people growing a wedding video business. And whenever you think about building a business and building a brand, you have to think about Ray Roman. So for the few people that might not know, who you might be, let's just jump in real quick. How'd you get started? Where were you when you got started? What's that brief story of who you are, how you got started?
My story's kind of odd. I was actually a policeman at the time. I was doing detective work. I was on a SWAT team, and really I had no thoughts of becoming any type of videographer, much less, a wedding videographer. I was really just doing stuff with my kids, filming them. And one day I tried to figure out how to transfer like all these tapes that I had of my kids to a DVD. So I went over to Best Buy. I found the gadget, and the gadget actually came with, I don't know if you guys remember, there was some software. It was called Pinnacle Studio. Mm-hmm. You probably remember this if you're going back 12 years.
That's old school.
It's old school, man. It's like really old school. I didn't know what the heck it was, but I said, you know what? Let me just load it in the computer and see what it does. And I'm telling you, within like 30 minutes of loading this software, I felt like the Steven Spielberg of my home. I was blown away. Like, I'm literally sitting there making the cheesiest movies you've ever seen, but to me, it was like Star Wars, man, and my kids were the stars. So I just got obsessed with it, man. And I didn't really know how to film or anything like that, but I think I was more obsessed with the editing part. So that's kind of what I was doing. So I got so obsessed with that. I literally ran out of footage of my kids to edit. That's how much I was editing. So I'd go to work, and I was telling the guys, I said, hey, if you guys got any home videos, any photos, I mean, it didn't matter, man. I was doing mini movies of anything. So I was literally just doing that. And at one point I said, you know what? I've had this old video camera for like, 7, 8 years or whatever. Let me get a new one. So I went out. I don't know if you remember this stuff, man, because did you get into the game like when DSLRs were out already?
No, I started with the mini DV tapes.
Oh, okay, good. Oh, okay, so you're back, yeah. So if you remember back then, they had the Sony VX2100.
Oh, that bad boy.
And what is it? The Sony PD170. So it was back then. So same thing, no HD, literally mini DV. And I bought it. I bought it not knowing that it was one of the most popular cameras for wedding and event people. Was, besides, unless you were like on Canon or something like that, but Sony seemed to be like the camera for wedding and event people. So I got the camera just to kind of shoot better footage of my kids or whatever. And one day, one of the cops at work was like, he goes, hey man, you got that new fancy camera, and I got my wedding coming up. You think you could shoot it? And I was like, hell yeah, I can shoot your wedding. How hard could it be to film a wedding, right? And I figured I got a camera. That's all I need, right? So I said, you know what? I definitely need a second shooter. You know, I was watching some stuff online or whatever, and I said, you know what? Let me get a second shooter so I can get a second angle or whatever. So I literally, at the time I was in the detective bureau, so I literally went up to my crime scene guy and I was like, hey man, let me ask you something. He's like, yeah. I was like, you got experience, right? Like filming these crime scenes? And he goes, yeah, man, I film them all the time. And I said, you think you could film a wedding with me? And he was like, hell yeah, we can film it. So that was kind of the beginning of this journey. Because after we shot the wedding, and it wasn't a complete train wreck as it should have been, because it was luckily enough, it was an outdoor wedding, so we didn't really have to deal too much with low light situations. So the footage, believe it or not, I mean, I knew enough to know to kind of just leave the camera on the tripod and leave it alone. So the footage itself wasn't too bad. Now, what I did in post was just a disaster because, man, let me tell you something. If Pinnacle Studio had one thing, it was about 1,000,000 different special effects that you could pay like $30 and unlock.
And we
right?
need to use all of them.
Oh, you got to use all of them. And now I bought the wedding effect package, right?
Perfect.
So it came with like the animated church bell transitions, so you could go from scene to scene. It had the animated rose petals dropping.
Yep.
Yeah. So literally, like every effect in that pack, I used, and I thought it was cool at the time. But that kind of started everything for me. I kind of got obsessed with the wedding stuff, and I really looked at it. You know, I went online to kind of see how the pros were doing it, and I just really wasn't that impressed. Like I didn't really see anything that blew me away. And I thought at the time, I said, you know what? I could probably do this better than these guys if I can learn how to do it, you know, like the proper way to do it. So that kind of began the journey for me.
I remember your creative live class. I want to say it was 2012, 2013-ish. I remember watching that, and I think Rob Adams had one about the same time you did. Anyway, I remember watching both of those, and the exact thought that I had in my mind was, these guys are really good, but I could do it.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, the wedding industry is so funny because there is this whole sect of us, and we just look at someone who is doing something, and we're like, yeah, I could totally do that. So that was my introduction into you, was your creative live class. I know I saw you speak at WPPI in 2013 or 2014, somewhere around in there. You really introduced me into this really cool cinematic world, and it's really inspiring me to see where you've come from. You know, you started off as a police officer filming stuff for free, and now you're doing these super high-end, multi-million-dollar, amazing, beautiful weddings. It's really cool to see that you're helping me and then others like me help us grow our businesses and our brands.
Yeah, and it's really, I think it's really all about that. It's kind of, you know, you hit on it when you said, you know, when you looked at my stuff and you said, hey, I can do that. It's the self-belief. And the self-belief is a massive part of it. And a lot of people don't understand that. You know, it kind of starts there, because if you don't believe you can do it, you're really not going to be able to get anybody else to believe you can do it. So I can't, yeah.
Well, so what year was that when you started?
I shot that wedding in 2006.
Okay, so 06. I think my first wedding was like summer of 07, something like that. So, and what did you charge him for that first wedding? Did you do it pro bono? How'd that go?
Dude, if I would have charged him for what I produced, I should have been arrested.
You gave him $100 and said, "I'm sorry."
Yeah. No, let me tell you something. You know, look, that wedding and any wedding that I do today, they're very similar in that I always pour my heart and soul into it. So, you know, whatever I gave them at the time was, you know, it was the best I could do based on what I did and what I knew. Yep. So, you know, I certainly wasn't trying to, you know, hand over something cheesy. It only looked cheesy about a year later when I realized, oh my God,
that's the cycle.
I'm a complete imbecile.
Yes.
You know, to think I could have professionally shot and produced a wedding film. And I got to be honest with you. Look, back then, it wasn't like wedding videographers were completely blowing you off your chair. You know what I mean? The wedding edits themselves were very documentary. They're long, they're boring, they're dreadful. There was, for the most part, there was really nothing stunning about the imagery. It was standard def. So, they're nice. Like I would run across videos that were just, they were well produced. It didn't look obviously anything like it does today, but they certainly were very solid. Camera techniques were good. The audio sounded great. You could tell, they were thinking creatively about their shots and things like that. So there was a handful of people. And then look, I'm a very competitive person. Like, you have to be competitive in this industry to survive, because every year you've just got a ton of people entering the market. And if you're not ready to do battle, I mean, you're just really gonna kind of disappear.
Yep.
You're either just gonna disappear in that low to mid-range market, or you're gonna keep up. You're gonna keep evolving, and you're gonna have a vision. And that vision being, to kind of knock out the competition. There really should be no competition. And if you're not thinking like that, I just believe you're going to get swallowed up by the popular market, which is the low to mid range. You're not going to make, in the end, you'll book a lot of weddings, but you certainly won't be making a lot of money.
Right. And so let's talk about that just for a sec. So the first wedding you did in '06, let's fast forward to 2018, just so for sake of time. This year, your weddings, let's talk about some of the weddings you've done this year, where you've been, any notable weddings. What does a typical Ray Roman wedding in 2018 look like?
I mean, my wedding could be anything. Obviously, look, if they're hiring me, they're spending some money on the wedding, so I'm probably never going to end up at a wedding where they're spending less than, I don't know, less than 80 to 100,000. Because it just wouldn't make sense, right? That type of thing. So I would say like $500,000 and above. I've done a few, obviously multi-million-dollar weddings this year. So it's just a very different market. It's a very small market. It does exist. A lot of people in the industry, myself included, back in the day, were made to believe that you really couldn't make a lot of money as a wedding videographer. So, I found that after, a few years at this, I found that to be a complete myth. People are spending a ton of money. And believe it or not, look, if somebody's spending $8 million on their wedding, trust me, they can spend, 10, 15, 20,000 on the video production.
Absolutely.
They could spend $100,000 on the video production. So it really just depends. But you got to believe that you can make that money, because if you don't believe that you can earn that type of money, you're never going to earn it. A lot of it, like I said, has to do with self-belief. Believing your worth, believing that a client should pay you that sum of money. If you only believe they should be paying you $2,500, you're probably going to be averaging about $2,500. So it's really all about self-belief, and that's where it starts.
So, like, I've been to out to your workshops before. We're talking about, a lot of the common theme, I think, is just, how do I get from charging $2,500 to charging, $10,000 or more, or whatever that is for whoever's listening. And from what I've seen, it comes down to the brand that you've built, the context that you know. I want to talk a little bit just about how you transitioned from going, filming a friend's wedding. What was your process of saying, hey, we're going to build a brand around me? What was that like? How did you build that brand? How are you continually building that brand today?
So I made a lot of changes when I first started. Not like the first year or two, because I was literally just learning. But after that, I kind of really took a sit back, just to kind of look at everything, because I was kind of happy in a way, but I wasn't happy about certain things. Especially the edits. I just felt like they were very long, and there was just a lot of parts that got really boring. Just naturally you'd want to fast forward through. And that was really the traditional wedding video, was literally, 45, 60 minute, 90 minute, 2 hour, just long and dreadful video. And it had, look, it had nice parts in it, because I was going out with this vision where I wanted to be creative, but in the end, the client was still expecting a long video. So you were kind of forced to force parts of that wedding into that edit that you normally wouldn't do. You definitely wouldn't do it today, right? So I started the concept of producing really short wedding films, which back, over 10 years ago, that was really going against the grain. And a lot of people thought I was nuts. And there was no way they were going to get this past the clients, because what would be the first complaint?
It's not long enough. Yeah.
It's not long enough. Where the hell's the rest of the video? You were there all day. The typical stuff that you hear, right? You were here 10 hours. Where's the rest of the video? That type of deal. So I said, look, if I'm going to do this full time, I got to be 100% happy with what I'm producing. Like, I'm not going to sit here and make myself believe that I'm happy producing these 60-minute videos that were a little bit boring, right? So I said, you know what, let me just, one of these weddings that I got coming up, I'm going to test the waters. Like, I'm going to see if I can, because you have in your mind, imagine if you have like full control over an edit, right? Like, you have this idea, you're like, man, I could really make this insane if I could just do it 100% my way, right? Which back then you just, you could add a little bit of you, but most of them, what they were expecting, right? So I said, you know what? One of these weddings I got coming up, I'm going to test this out. So I got this couple, and this was the wrong couple to do this with, because they literally, they'd been married like 20 years, but they never had an actual wedding. So this was going to be the first time that they actually had like a big blowout wedding. So I wasn't figuring I was going to be able to do it with them, right? So I went to this wedding, low expectations. I figured they're an older couple. This is their first actual wedding, and there's no possible way. Like, if there was going to be anybody in the world that was going to want to watch everything, like a long version of everything, it would have been the couple that waited 20 years to have a wedding, right? So I said, okay, maybe not this wedding, but maybe the next one, right? So I get to this wedding. First off, the couple looked like two models. Like, they were a little bit older, but my God, they were good looking, right? So I start shooting this wedding. The preps were out of this world. And then I'm like, oh, okay. And I still have no expectations of this wedding. So we move on. Ceremony, the word spoken, in another stratosphere. I mean, it was just insane. They were so well spoken because they're educated, they're rich. I mean, just like, they got everything. So I'm like, man, this wedding seems so great, right? So we do candid shooting, and it was just phenomenal. I mean, like, you didn't have to tell this couple anything. Like, you just put them in front of the camera and magic is happening. Like, I'm sure you guys have had that a few times, right? Where you're thinking of what you want them to do, and they're already doing it, right? And they're giving you even better things than what you thought of. So I got back to my house, I call it the studio. And I said, you know what? I'm going to do it with this wedding. Like, I'm going to produce something my way, like 100%. And I was already prepared in my mind where I was going to give them the short film, but I was also going to be prepared to give them the long film that they were going to ask for sure. So I didn't know how long this film was going to be, because, I didn't know what I had yet until I started editing. But I said, one thing about this film, it's going to be interesting from the first second to the last second. There's going to be no lag in between. So I finished editing this film, and it ended up being 17 minutes. And I was petrified to deliver this film. I was literally like just shaking in my boots. I had the full film ready to go, for whenever they asked me for the full film, because the 17-minute was just not gonna fly. To this day, and that was probably about a long time ago. That was over 10 years, like way over 10 years ago. I'm trying to think what year it was that they got married. But to this day, they've never once asked me for a full version. To this day. Like, they got that 17-minute, and not only were they thrilled with that video, we actually became close, like personal friends after that with this couple. So when that flew with them, I said, you know what? This is going to become the standard now, at least for me, right? It's going to become the standard, because if I can get away with this with them, I can do it with anybody. Like, this was the ultimate test. And from that wedding, that's where I kind of began this whole short form wedding film thing. And I literally began teaching all about short form weddings back like in 2009. And back then, literally, like I had rooms packed with videographers who thought I was nuts. Like, there was no possible way they were going to be able to do this. And nowadays, it's the standard. You know, right now, it's, you know, what is a long traditional wedding video? I mean, it's almost unheard of.
Yeah, right. I was going to say that I think it's really interesting, you know, whenever it comes to believing in yourself and building your brand. You were, you know, 10 years ago putting these sort of short films out there that no one else was, or at least that was perception, right? And so I think it's really interesting that we, as videographers, we don't like to, you know, stick out from everybody else. I mean, we like to be creative and we're individuals and all that stuff, but we're still very much, we kind of do what everyone else does, right? And I think in building a brand, as we're trying to talk about that a little bit more, you being true to yourself or doing stuff different and you doing your things your way can really help you in building something that people will remember and something that is truly unique.
Yeah, for sure. You know, it's what it's all about. It's what it's all about. And, you know, back then, look, there was, I think around that time, people started kind of going against the grain, and there might have been like 30-minute films out there, but like the sub 20, there was just.
Yeah, I remember that. I mean, people would be mad at us if it was under 45 minutes. Like, just they wanted everything.
Like, well, you know, one of the big mistakes that I made back in the day, and look, this is like a big thing people have to realize right now, you know, whether they've been doing it, you know, a few years or they're just getting started. But at least with me, I don't know if you guys can relate to this. I kind of had this feeling with clients when they booked me, you know, because look, I didn't know how to run a business. You know, I was literally, I came from like a SWAT team detective background, so I didn't know the first thing about running a business. But you know, since it's a wedding thing, it's kind of personal, right? And I always got a sense that, you know, these people were my friends. You know, like you were kind of close, and hey, I'm going to film your wedding. This is great. And there was a very like unofficial type of, you know, rapport that you had with the clients and things like that. You know, it's very kind of like, oh my God, you're gonna record our memories and produce this and whatever. And you kind of, I'm not saying you forget about the contract, but you may not take it as serious as it's written. Right?
Sure.
So, and I give you an example. I had an experience with a bride, you know, a long time ago, and I delivered her one of these short films. And dude, her film was amazing. I deliver her like 18 minutes and it's gold. I mean, this film was just amazing. And she gets the film, and I thought, because look, she didn't pay for all the work that I put into this 18-minute feature film, right? Like, she paid for like a 45-minute doc style, you know, just kind of bland video. So I thought I was hooking her up, like I was throwing her a bone. And I get that email, and she goes, hey, I love this highlight video you sent me, but where's the long video we paid for? And I felt like a dagger just drive right into my chest. And I was just like, what is she talking about? I just hooked her up. But the thing that I forgot, the thing that I didn't realize, and I kind of let go, was the fact that I was contractually obligated to deliver at least a 45-minute film. So what could I say at that point? She was being a you-know-what, right? And I was having all the thoughts in my mind was like, you know what? I can't believe you're doing this. Like, I just literally handed you a pot of gold. But guess what? At the end of the day, I had to deliver that long film because I was contractually obligated. But you know what? It reminded me of the fact that, you know, no matter how close and friendly we get with these clients, at the end of the day, whatever you've got built in that contract, you got to deliver.
Right.
And look, and nowadays, most of my clients, I don't know how this happens. I would say like 70% of my clients are attorneys. And I'm like, and I don't like that. Like, I don't like it.
No.
but sometimes, you know, somehow it happens. So I got to kind of keep that in mind. And I'll tell you, like, nowadays, I find myself literally like every 3 or 4 months adding new stuff to the contract, just adding new stuff just to protect me. Because you just, look, you don't want to, especially things that you can't control at a wedding. I don't want to be liable for it. And audio is a big thing. I've introduced like just a huge section on audio into my contract because it's one of these things that, you know, we kind of make ourselves liable for it, right? But it's way out of our control at these events, right? Like we try to control it as best we can, but at the end of the day, you know, whoever's running sound could hand you, you know, some pretty crummy audio. And then, you know, that kind of really affects the film. And, you know, it really affects what we're delivering to the clients. And that, whoever that sound guy was, he's long gone,
Sure.
right? But there we are delivering this film with, you know, I mean, how does his audio sound? You know, what's the client going to say? Do they have trained ears enough to know that this is not professional sounding audio? Are they going to call you on it? Things like that. So,
So you're talking a little bit about just like your you know, transition into, you know, doing shorter films, kind of being that pioneer when it came to, you know, taking them from 60 to 45 minutes. What does like a typical package today look like with you? Are you a la carte? Do they have a base that they can purchase? What all does that include? And like kind of what is pretty typical for someone to book you? Not only how much does it cost, but like what all's included?
so the only thing that I deliver is I call it the feature film, which is it's the film based on their wedding and whatever happened at the wedding. I don't know how long that film's going to be because I'm literally doing every type of wedding there is really. I mean, from Indian to Jewish to non-denominational to Pakistani to Russian. I mean, like we don't know what we're going to get until we film the wedding, you know. So this whole thing, and honestly, it made me realize just how crazy we were as videographers. And you guys can relate to this. You've been doing this a while. Can you imagine how crazy it is that we would have verbiage in our contract guaranteeing a certain length of video to the client? I don't know if you guys ever had that in your contracts, but like I had like 45 to 60 minutes at the beginning, and then it kind of changed from like 25 to 45 minutes, you know, things like that as I was shortening things. But, you know, I began to think like, how can we predict how long the wedding video is going to be if we haven't even shot the wedding yet? Like, we don't even know what's going to happen. We don't know if people are going to dance. We don't know if people are going to give speeches. We don't know how long the ceremony is going to really be. And yet we're guaranteeing in a contract how long this film's going to be. And we're basically saying, hey, I'm going to give you, no matter what, I'm going to give you a really entertaining film that's going to be 25 to 45 minutes. But I don't even know what's going to happen at your wedding. Like that's one of the craziest things I ever did in my contract was guaranteeing a length of film. Did you guys ever do that?
Oh yeah. Back in the day, it was, you know, guarantee of the you know, full everything, the raw footage of it. I mean, it was just, you know, everything that could be in it. But yeah, I mean, I think we started out with like a guarantee of 30 minutes or 45, something like that.
Yeah. So when clients call me now, you know, the past few years, and they're like, Ray, how long is this film going to be? You know, especially the parents. The parents always want to know because most of my weddings, the parents are paying for it, right? So I'm like, look, I don't even know. I haven't even shot the wedding yet. I don't know what's going to happen. Like, how can I tell you how long the film is going to be if I don't even have the footage? And then it starts to make sense to the client. So I always tell people, I said, look, just have a regular conversation with your clients. Have a logical conversation because, look, what makes sense to you right now, it makes sense to the client. You know, like they're gonna sit there and be like, my God, how am I gonna expect this videographer to know how long the film's gonna be if he hasn't even filmed the wedding yet? So what I try to do with the clients is just make it make sense to them. Just give them a logical reason why you can't tell them how long the film's going to be. I always tell them, I said, look, after I film that wedding, at the end of the night, I'll be able to give you a rough idea how long the film's going to be. But right now, I could tell you on average, maybe 15, 20 minutes. But I'm telling you right now, If nobody dances at your wedding, there's no speeches. It's a 8-minute ceremony. You may get like 12 minutes. I mean, I don't know.
Yeah.
You know, like, is it gonna? Do I have enough content to edit a 20-minute piece that's actually going to entertain you? I don't know, but it never really gets to that point. I really just tell them, I said, look, I haven't shot the wedding. I don't have like a crystal ball or anything. Like, I don't know what's going to happen, and I don't know how much footage I'm going to end up with. But I can tell you on average, you know, 15, 20 minutes. I've never really had a film that's less than 14, 15 minutes, and that's literally where nothing happened. So, you know, and I can look at a wedding just with basic common sense. Like, if I know I'm doing if I'm doing a Latin wedding, I know there's no possibility that they're not going to dance. Sure. You know, that type of thing. So I already kind of know, look, I'm going to have some content here or that. But look, I've had weddings where I went in thinking it was going to be the wedding of the year. Just like you guys probably, right? Like, you go in with these massive expectations just based on what you believe the potential of this wedding is, right? And you leave, and it's probably one of the worst weddings you've ever been to, because they just, somewhere along the line, somebody just absolutely killed that wedding. You know, whether it was the bride either completely stressed out, or it was the bride thinking she knew better than professionals. I mean, I've had grooms. I had a groom in Santorini. It was in Santorini. It was just, they spent about $8 million. And I went in thinking this is going to be just the ultimate showpiece. Like, this is going to be the best of the best, right? And it ended up being one of the worst weddings I've ever filmed. You figure that out. $8 million spent, and ends up being the worst wedding I've ever shot. And it was literally because the groom single-handedly destroyed that wedding. Just destroyed the wedding. And I left thinking, like, that's why I tell people, I said, look, this whole idea, you know, of doing these free weddings because you think it's going to be this showpiece that you're going to be able to use, you know, as a demo and things like that, it's very risky. And I tell you, most times it doesn't work out. It doesn't end up being what you thought it was going to be, right? You know which weddings end up being home runs? The weddings where you went in with the lowest expectations sometimes, right? Sure. It's almost like that couple, the older couple that waited 20 years to get married. I had the lowest expectations. I was like, oh, I'm going to go film this older couple today. You know, it's going to be yeah, it's going to be a social security check bingo wedding, right? and that wedding ended up being my showpiece for at least a couple years. Imagine that. I went in with the lowest expectations, and that wedding literally just, it blew the roof off.
So you are, I mean, I saw you just posted a film from Greece, you know, Italy. You're traveling all over the world, doing these, you know, massive budget weddings, you know. I guess just kind of to wrap that question back up is kind of what, you know, your couples in 2018, you know, if you're looking back on the year, what are you delivering to the majority? I mean, is there kind of like a, you know, you said 10 to 12 minutes or 15, you know, something like that. But like, are you booking them and then they're adding a whole bunch of stuff? What does like a typical 2018 bride look like? That's the, you know, what kind of package are they ending up with? What are they spending?
Well, I'm doing a lot of Indian weddings right now, believe it or not. And I used to say, you know what, I can't handle these Indian weddings because of the post-production, right? You know, it's like 3-4 days of footage and just a lot of post-production. And I used to limit myself to only maybe like 1 or 2 a year. And I know a lot of guys were doing that. There was some people in the industry that just told me flat out, they're like, I don't do Indian weddings. Like, there's no possible way. And I think what happened was, this is like my honest assessment, what's happened with Indian weddings. I think it got to the point where Indians found themselves in a position where they couldn't find really good wedding videographers, because most of them were just like, I don't want to get involved with that stuff. It's just way too much post for not a lot of money, because, you know, they would want to haggle you, right? Right now, what they're paying for Indian weddings is ridiculous. So like right now, I don't mind just only doing Indian weddings, because these weddings right now, they're paying anywhere between like 15 to 35,000.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm good with doing a few of those a year.
Sure. I think we all would be.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm good with just doing a few of those a year. And you know what? If I got to spend a couple extra days at the wedding, I don't really care. You know, and I think once you kind of get adjusted to the pace of the Indian wedding, it's not that bad. Like I do Indian weddings now. In fact, in September was like my death month, because I had 6 back-to-back 3-day Indian weddings.
Oh my gosh. Yeah.
And I thought that was going to be the death of me. But I tell you, like once you kind of get used to the pace, it's not really that bad. I mean, look, your feet are going to be killing you, you know, at the end, you know, because these are long days. I mean, I had one, check this out. They hired me for, the contract was for 25 hours. 25 hours, which is the average, honestly, between 3 days. About 25 is about the average number of hours I have found, sometimes 30. I got the timeline for this wedding, and I'm looking at the times, like the start times and the end times. And I'm like, this is a lot of hours, right? I wasn't even really going to break it down on my calculator to kind of, I just assumed it was going to be around 25 hours. But I was looking at all the start times. The start times were literally like 4:30 a.m., ending at like 2:30 a.m. And I'm like, what the hell is this? I broke out the calculator, and it was 49 hours over 3 days. And I called the planner, and I said, hey, you realize this is not like 25 hours like what's in the contract. I literally just calculated all the hours, and it's like 49. And she was like, yeah. And I said, I hate to do this, but that's a lot of overtime. And she goes, just put in whatever it is. And I started licking my chops at that point. Because they have like no problem with the overtime. And I don't know if they paid attention to that overtime rate. But my gosh, at the end of that wedding, when that check was being delivered, you know, I was a happy man. I was dead.
Yeah.
But I was a happy dead.
Yep.
Yeah, but that was a lot of hours. 49 hours in 3 days. Literally, like, I don't think I could walk in a week. Yeah, because I had the wrong shoes on. After that, I bought some shoes that are kind of intended for that purpose. But I had like these really nice dress shoes because I wanted to look sharp, you know?
Yep.
That was a big mistake, man. My feet were black and blue.
Yeah, I bet. That's awesome.
Yeah. But that's the typical bride right now, just to answer your question, is I'm getting a lot of Indian weddings. And the thing is, once you nail one Indian wedding, it's over, man. They're all going to come because these Indian communities are all interconnected. So once they kind of see that you're understanding all the customs and traditions of Indian weddings, because they typically hire Indian photographers and videographers. And it's like that with, and you guys probably seen this, it's like that with a lot of different cultures and backgrounds. And, you know, like I used to get that a lot with the Russian weddings. I was doing a lot of Russian weddings. And they typically, like Russian weddings, they don't hire outside people to come in that aren't Russian, right? But I did this one Russian wedding, and I did it really well. And once they realized, like, hey, this guy gets it, it was nonstop Russian weddings. So it's kind of the same thing with Indian weddings. You know, once they realize, like, hey, this guy gets it, because there's a lot of little things that happen that, you know, some people might skip over and might not think it's that important, and it's like really important. So there's a lot of things to understand, and there's a lot of things not to miss. So that's why I said, like, once you kind of really understand, like, what's, you know, because if you don't really understand, like, what's important, you may sit there and just film all 49 hours thinking, like, oh, my God, I just got to get everything. But you didn't really need everything, that type of deal. So, yeah.
That's good. I like that. I mean, and I think that, you know, something that you do that I think is really smart, you know, you're saying about being just like logistical, you know, like making it logical for people in your conversation. You know, we've talked about this on the podcast before. A lot of people And I want to talk about this. A lot of people just kind of are, basically racing to the bottom. A lot of the wedding videographers. It's what can I throw in? What can I give you? Let me give you some drone footage. I'll stay there late. I'll do all this for free. And they're just basically competing against each other to like get $3,000 or $2,000 or whatever it is for a wedding. What advice would you have for somebody to kind of break out of the low end, working their self? Because you start out, you're new. You might have to charge a little bit less, but like, what would you say is the roadmap to getting to some of these higher profile weddings?
Well, you just described about 99.9% of wedding videographers. It's literally just, and I don't think they want to race to the very bottom, but I think what happens is they get very comfortable. They get very comfortable and desperate at the same time in this low to mid-range market, right? Because your low to mid-range market, like you said, the number that you talked about, that $2,000 to $3,000, that's literally the low to mid-range market. It's the average in there. So look, most brides are not spending millions of dollars on a wedding. You're talking about, I think it's less than 1% of weddings are spending in that range. So it's a very small percentage. So you got to imagine, like, I always say, like 80% of the brides out there, they're in the low to mid range. And then you've got about 10 to 15 that are in the high end. And then you've got like less than 1% that are spending ridiculous sums of money. They're into the millions, right? So most videographers will find a home in the low to mid range because it's your easy money, right? Because you can go out every weekend and you can grab $2,000 to $3,000, maybe $4,000, if you're good. And to a lot of people, look, I mean, if you do that 3-4 times a month, that's not too bad. Mm-hmm. That's not too bad of a way to make a living. Now, look, if you're going out in this day and age and you're charging $1,000 and you're good, you're just an idiot. Because honestly, look, here's the deal. If you tried to rent all the equipment that you take to an event, you'd be spending more money than most videographers in this industry charge. Try to go on Lens Pro to Go and rent those cameras and lenses and batteries and drones and gimbals and tripods and monopods. Try to rent your own gear. Mm-hmm. Like, do a funny test. Like, all the gear that you're lugging to an event, try to rent it and see what the price comes out to. So it's crazy. I mean, look, back when I started, there was really nobody charging. They were charging about $1,000, and that was back then. And look, there was people that were charging $2,000. And that was back when there was no feature films, there was no DSLRs, there was no drones, there was no gimbals, there was no sliders, there was none of this stuff. There was no feature films and spending all this time producing these short masterpieces, right? Mm-hmm. So it just blows my mind that as an industry, we haven't gone anywhere, right? Like, the average cost of a wedding video today, sadly enough, is the average cost of a wedding video when I first started, back when we were recording to mini DV. Now, how sad is that? It's just pathetic. It's not pathetic for me because I'm not swimming in that part of the ocean, right? Like, I'm swimming in shallower water where I'm not drowning, right? I'm swimming there, so I'm sad for the industry that it's kind of stayed where it's at. But look, the deal is, and this is what I always say, we have set the standard. The brides don't set the standard. We, as videographers, set the standard. Look, here's the reality. Brides don't come to us and say, okay, this is what we want you guys to be charging, right? It doesn't work that way. We tell the brides what we charge. So we set the standard. So this whole idea that you can go complain that you don't get paid enough money, that's not on the bride. That's on you. You told the bride how much you're worth. She didn't tell you what to charge. You know, that's the reality of the situation. So we as wedding videographers, make no mistake about it, have set the standard, and we have absolutely annihilated any type of standard that we should have set for these brides to be getting like Hollywood caliber, commercial caliber wedding films. You know, we killed it.
100%.
I say, look, you know when the death of wedding videographers occurred? Like, do you know when it actually happened, you guys? Because I actually know the time and the year that the wedding video industry was killed.
Nick knows the answer.
Was it the release of the Canon 5D Mark II?
It was the summer of 2009 was the beginning of the death of the wedding video industry. And it was the release of the Canon 5D Mark II. When they released that camera in 2009, I was thinking at the time, because look, my prices weren't what they are right now, right? I was still starting off at that time. I'd only been in the game seriously for like a little over a year. When they released that camera and I saw that footage, I thought, oh my God, this is it. This is what we've been waiting for. Like, this is literally going to increase our rates across the board by at least $2,000 to $3,000. So if the average of a good wedding video at that time was, say, $2,000 or $2,500, $4,500 to $5,000 could easily be the standard now. So then what happened?
Prices stayed the same.
Which is what always happened, yeah. and what you touched on was these guys were in such a rush to give it away that they literally just, at that time, they killed the wedding video industry, because not only did they start giving away the DSLR, right? Because now, you know the phone calls you got, right? The other wedding video company, they're going to throw in the DSLR for free. And when I got that first phone call and I heard that mom tell me that, I was thinking like, no, don't give that away. Like, look, give everything else away, but don't give the DSLR for free, right? And I'm telling you, every phone call after that was like, oh, you're going to charge us extra for the DSLR? And I was just like, no, you got to be kidding me. Like, these guys aren't going to give away the DSLR, are they? And I'm telling you, one after the next, after the next, after the next. It just, so now, just like today, check, and you guys know this is true. Now, just like today, the drone is the standard, right? Like that just, now it's just standard with every package, right? Instead of charging more to be FAA licensed, you know, and get like really beautiful shots from a drone that we can now include in the film, instead of charging for it, guys do what they've always done. They just kind of give it away. But when they did that in 2009, I knew it was the beginning of the end, because I said, I can't imagine there's going to be another camera that could ever be released that's going to have such a difference in quality as the 5D did to like a regular video camera. And it's never happened. I mean, here we are like almost 10 years later. Sure, they've released cameras that are a little bit better than the next, but the difference between the 5D, between the DSLR and the video cameras that we were shooting with before the DSLR was just massive. When you saw the difference in quality, it blew you away. So I knew that it's just going to be impossible that they release a camera at any point that's going to have that massive, you know, difference between what we're doing now and what they're going to release, you know. And it's never happened. It's never happened in 10 years. And I'm telling you, if you want to point to one, you know, one time in our history where we had the opportunity to raise the standard and we didn't, it was when they released the DSLR.
Good.
Yeah, it was the death of the industry.
You know, I just wanted to say the thing that you said there about how we set the industry standard on pricing and all that stuff, not our couples. That's something I heard you say maybe 4 or 5 years ago when I was starting out, and it has really stuck with me because I was like, I can't charge more for my area. These brides won't pay that amount or do whatever it is that I was thinking, but it's not for them to decide. It's for us to decide. So that's a huge piece of business advice that I think has stuck with me over the past 5 or 6 years. That has really helped me in my business. So thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, it is true because look, I'm telling you, like the first few years I was doing this, I mean, I would go to these video conferences and everybody's so disgruntled, right? They're like, oh man, we got all these cameras and gear and we're doing all this work and they don't want to pay us nothing. And I kind of got wrapped up in that whole thing, right? Like, I'm like, yeah, they don't want to pay us anything, right? And then I started realizing, I was like, wait a minute, we're putting the price on the product, right? Yeah. And we're delivering the message. We're telling them how much we charge. So how can we complain about them not wanting to pay enough when they are just paying whatever we tell them the product's worth? You know, so that part of it was crazy to me. And it really is all about the message and the standard that you set. And I'll tell you, look, you know, I think before we were recording this podcast, you were telling me the kind of rates that you're getting in Oklahoma, right? So let me ask you a question about that because this is a good example. And I think you've told me that you've been able to charge over 10 grand.
Yep.
Quite a few times,
yeah,
right?
Yeah.
And it probably happens a few times a year, right?
Yeah, I would say our average is between 8 and 10 for a wedding these days. So.
Okay, so let's just play with that for a little bit. I'm going to tell you how two people can kill an entire market. And this is, you tell me whether this makes sense to you or not. Now, Sarah and Rick are in your same market?
Yeah, they're awesome.
I'm guessing they probably average right around the same, in the 8 to 10 range, or maybe less.
No, I think they're a little more than we are, somewhere in there. I mean, let's just say 9 to 10 is the average, right? What do you think would happen if at some point you and the Penns dropped your rate to 4 grand? What becomes the new standard in Oklahoma? 4 grand.
4 grand. And you just, between two people, you just killed that market. A market that was once thriving, right? Where you could come in, you know, start producing some really good work and average, you know, 8, 9, 10, and even more per wedding. And literally like two people can come into a market. Imagine, I won't even use you and the Penns as an example. Let's say like two newbies, relatively new, right? They've only been at it, you know, 2, 3, 4 years. They come into your market and they're charging like 3,000 or 4,000 for work that's on par almost with you and the Penns. Yeah. They're killing you guys, and they're essentially killing that market. So you got to be really careful, because I've seen markets in America that were literally, I'm talking about good markets, they were killed by like 3 or 4 studios. Sure. Like completely killed by 3 or 4 studios. So it doesn't take much to kill a market, and it doesn't take much to make a market thrive. You know, so how do you think the market in South Florida did as a result of me being down there and raising the rates and raising the standard? Sure. The people behind me were able to thrive, because guess what became their selling point? Hey, we're doing the same type of work Ray is, sure. but we charge less. That became their selling point. But guess what? If I was averaging 8, they could come in at 7, right? Which is not bad money, right? They could come in at 6 and be a really good deal. Now, what happens if Ray drops his rate to 4? Now I'm killing the market. You know, so everything's kind of relative. But the leaders of the pack, you're going to control what the standard is, what the high-end standard is, like what the potential for people to make is controlled by the most talented people in that market. Now, sadly enough, if the most talented people in a market don't know how to run a business, that market will suffer as a result of those people not being able to run a business properly. And that's the reality of the situation out there. If the leaders of your market don't know how to run a business, everybody suffers. If they know how to run their business, everybody else thrives. So right now in Oklahoma, I'm guessing there's a lot of people that can easily make $4,000 or $5,000.
Absolutely.
Just, you know what I mean? Because they can come in, look, maybe they're not producing the same caliber of work as you guys, but you know what? They're producing good work, like good, solid work, and they're not too far behind. And the fact that you guys are telling your market, hey, we're charging like $8,000 to $10,000, most of the market can't afford that. You know, but you've raised the standard enough to where, you know what, they say, you know what, look, realistically, you know, let's just try to come up with like 4,000 to 6,000 and get something nice. Maybe not, you know, like pen level or your level, but they're still going to get something nice.
Sure. Yeah,
so that's kind of the way the market works. You know, it's controlled by the top. Really, it's really controlled by the top, because I'm telling, and I'm going to use, and if anybody's listening to this podcast that's from Central Florida, they're going to be able to easily relate to what I'm about to say right now. That market, Central Florida, has been dead for years. And it's been dead because you had a few people, you had a handful of people in that Central Florida market that were some of the most talented videographers at one time in the entire nation. And they just weren't charging enough. And they killed the market. So the norm, the standard as a client to get like the top of the top wedding video wasn't that much. It was about $2,500. So imagine what the next tier down has to suck up and make, right? You're talking like 1,000 or 1,500.
Yeah.
You know, so to this day, Central Florida has never been able to recover. That market was killed, and there's money there. There's money there. Look, there's money in every market. Like for somebody to sit here and tell me that there's not millionaires in every major city of every major state in America, you're just, you know, you're delusional.
100%. I think too, what you said, I think just by being the pioneers, you know, the people that are listening to this are the ones that are aiming, you know, for the top. And it's just refreshing almost to hear the other side of it, where it's like, oh my goodness, there's almost a responsibility that I have to raise the standard, and I'm not going to give this away for free. And that's one of the things Nick and I are doing, you know, is like really trying to show people you don't have to give everything away. You don't have to, you know, throw everything in. And, you know, hearing you say, like, you know, if us and the Pendergraphs, if we lowered our prices, then the market would suffer. So like continuing to raise our prices, not just so we can make more money, but we are better experienced now. We have another year under our belt. We have, you know, new gear. We are providing that quality that comes along with it. But at the same time, like if we're just staying stagnant, so will our market. Okay, so we're coming up close on an hour, Ray. I do want to talk real quick before we wrap it up. There's so many things that we could talk about. But I want to talk about your workshops, what's going on there, when they are, kind of give us a little bit of a rundown on those. I know I went to the one out in Atlanta in February. It was awesome. Learned a lot, implemented a lot. Are you doing another round of those? When would those be coming up? Just tell us a little bit about the workshops.
Yeah, so I've got some workshops coming up right now. Those were so successful, the ones we did in January and February in Atlanta, that I said, you know what, let me do another round, because I get so many requests to do workshops like everywhere, right? So I said, let me do this one. I mean, what was your experience like in terms of like somebody that's traveling in and accessing the workshop like that?
Yeah.
And this is I'm just asking you honestly, because I just really don't know. I assume it's an okay experience.
Yeah, I mean, from beginning to end, I mean, like it was a direct flight from Tulsa to Atlanta. And so another 30-minute drive, I was there. You know, it was the one-day workshop. I felt like you could have gone 2 days. I would have been happy for another day. I mean, we left kind of like just chomping at the bit, wanting more. But like, I would consider myself more of a seasoned person in the industry. I've been around for over 10 years, but I still just picked up so many things, that I changed immediately. And it just kind of reiterated and gave me like that. I don't know. It just gave me like that push at the beginning of the year to
Yeah.
really.
And and I find that it reinforces stuff, right?
Mhm.
And so the tricky thing about my workshop is that I'm sitting there and I'm trying to cater to all levels, right? Because I'm going to have people that literally just picked up a camera. Then I'm going to have some people that have been doing it a year or two, right? And they're still trying to find their way. And then I'm going to have seasoned guys like you. You guys always make me nervous because look, I'll look at your work and I'm like, why is this guy coming to me to learn anything? Like he's doing pretty good, right? But one of the things that you just touched on right now is that maybe it's not like the overall stuff, right? Because, I am going to cover a lot of fundamental stuff. I'm going to cover all the techniques. I'm going to cover basically everything that I do to cover a wedding day. That's what I share, literally from A to Z. That's what I present. So like seasoned guys, you know what you're going to get out of that? You're going to do fine tweaks to what you already have, right? Like you've already got a system in place and you probably came to the workshop and you got, I'm hoping, a couple nuggets out, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah. So what I always say is, look, even with me, if I know that I can go somewhere and I can pick up a couple nuggets, right? Even if I sat there all day and there's that one aha moment or two aha moments where I'm just like, oh my God, this is either going to take my work to another level or it's going to take my business to another level and allow me to make more money. It was all worth it.
Yeah.
Just as a seasoned person, because look, I get a lot of people that have been doing this stuff even longer than I have. And they always come up to me and they're like, dude, I got some nuggets that are literally going to just like fill in the gaps.
Mm-hmm.
Like there was some gaps in my work that I just needed to fill in and you kind of filled them in. So look, the people that are just starting, I always say this is a gift to anybody just starting out or just been doing this like 1, 2, maybe 3 years. This is literally going to be a gift because you're going to get such a head start. Literally things that have taken me 10 years to figure out, right? I'm going to share in this workshop. Like I've literally narrowed down all the gear you need, all the techniques you need to employ to handle the worst of the worst situations. I'm going to share it in the workshop, right? From a business, I do have a business day. I don't think you went to the business day. You probably just went to the full day workshop. So full day workshop is it's going to cover absolutely everything that I do from preps to first look to candid to ceremony to reception to lighting to audio. Everything that I do to cover a wedding, we're going to cover that day. And then the next day, actually this year is going to be pretty cool because the business day, not only am I covering full business branding, and we're also doing the film critiques. Mm-hmm. So, we'll look at the films, we'll break your films down, and I'll kind of tell you. And actually, I have Jessica come in because Jessica's the editor, mm-hmm. and she's really good from an editing standpoint of breaking down, just obvious
really
things
cool.
that you're doing wrong. Yeah, and things that you could be doing better. But check this out. And I think you were about to touch on this stuff, was how I kind of went from these weddings where they were paying me $1,000 or $2,500 to like multi-million-dollar weddings where you're really cashing the cow now, right? Mm-hmm. So my thing is, at some point you got to be able to get in front of the right eyeballs, and not just get yourself in front of the right eyeballs. You got to get your work and your brand in front of the right eyeballs. So this year, what I've done is I'm actually bringing in as guest speakers. I'm bringing in a high-end wedding planner and a luxury hotel catering manager, so they can tell you directly what they're looking for. And this is just going to be like crazy awesome because, you don't have to take it from me. I want you to hear it from their mouth.
That's huge.
Yeah, because I'm not the guy I'm not the guy assessing your stuff. These are the people that you're trying to get your stuff in front of, and these are the people that I'm bringing in. This is that top 1%. When I talk about like the less than 1% where these clients are spending like millions of dollars and the budgets are just ridiculous and they're actually paying videographers what they're worth, these guest speakers that are coming in, that's the crew. I mean, if you want to know what they're looking for and what you need to do to get your stuff to that level in front of their eyeballs and actually get their attention, because you got to imagine, they've probably got like hundreds of vendors, right? Pitching their stuff, trying to get in front of their eyeballs. And they're probably just rolling their eyeballs at a lot of the stuff, you know? And it kind of gets to the point where they just don't have time to be looking at everything. So right now, they're going to tell you exactly what they're looking for. I don't even know what they're going to say. Like, I'm actually interested to hear what they're going to say. So, but I get it. You know what I mean? Like, look, I get what it takes to kind of get you on the map. But to kind of reinforce what I'm going to go over that day where we're talking about business and branding, I want to reinforce it by like these real players coming in and telling you, hey, he's right. You know, he's right. But here's what else you could do to get yourself on that map. So that business day, the business day is on the 14th. The workshop, that's on January 13th. It's almost sold out. So I'm kind of trying to push people over to the 15th. The 15th, we have a few seats left. So if you're interested, it's www.rayromanworkshop.com. Check it out. There's a little promo reel on there. You can check out a lot of the reviews that are on there from past workshops. But look, if you're kind of stuck in a rut and you're looking to get to that next level, I always say these workshops are a no-brainer. Whether if you're first starting out, it's a home run. But even if you're a seasoned person just kind of searching around for nuggets, this is a great place.
Well, man, there's about 3 to 5 more hours of time that we could spend talking to you, I'm sure, today. But
yeah,
the hours kind of running to the end here. We went a little bit over, but I'm sure our listeners won't be super upset about that. I will say that workshop, you know, I'm averaging more per wedding, every wedding since then. I can't go into all the details that we talked about, but man, it really did help me on the whole branding side of things and like putting a value on my brand and building that. And so I've redone lots of things since that workshop. So definitely, if you haven't, seen Ray's work or check that out, they can find you just at rayromanfilms.com to watch your wedding work. And then the workshop itself, like you said, is it rayromanworkshop.com?
Yes. Yeah. So if they want to go to the website, it's rayromanfilms.com, or they can just do rayroman.com.
Okay.
And then the workshop is rayromanworkshop.com.
Okay, perfect. And we'll put all that in the show notes for people to find you. It's really cool to have you on. I really appreciate you coming on. We'll definitely have to have you back.
Yeah, man, my pleasure.
To everybody out there listening, be sure to subscribe to the channel. Subscribe on YouTube and on iTunes. We've got the link there for you and all the show notes below. Again, thank you for listening along, and we will see you in the next podcast.
See ya.
Peace.